Okay. Hi, everybody. This is the class that I can't attend, and I'm thinking that doing chapter 12 in the form of a video format will probably be useful for you because there's a lot of material in there and a lot of it's boring. So I'm thinking if you want, you can like start and stop as you digest it and sort of say, I've had enough of listening to this boring stuff. I want to come back to it a little bit later. So I'm hoping that this will work out for you. So for the week of the 23rd, this will be in lieu of the 23rd's class. And then when we get back on the 30th, we'll cover chapter 11. They could be done in either order. That just happens to be how the book covers them. So hearing this first and hearing that second is not going to affect what you understand. Because at this point, we now know how to create a contract. We know we need an offer, acceptance, and consideration. And if we were in class, I would have written that on the board again. But remember, look for your offer, look for your acceptance, look for your consideration. Remember, your consideration is going both ways. Each party gets a benefit and each party has a burden. And once you see two benefits, two burdens, one benefit and one burden per person, you know you've got your contract. And then we can move on and move forward and look at these other topics. Like today we're going to be looking at third parties, which are people that are not a party to the contract but somehow benefit from the contract. Discharge, which means when are you no longer obligated to perform the contract, meaning either you're done or it doesn't have to, it's a breached contract or a contract that's just never going to get performed. And what are the remedies once there has been a breach? So that's chapter 12. It's a big chapter, got a lot of stuff in there. So I'm hoping this will give you a way to digest it a little bit easier so that you can keep coming back and forth to it. Okay, so why don't we start in? So third parties to the contract are people that are not parties to the contract, meaning they didn't participate in the offer or the acceptance, okay? But they're somehow affected by the contract, all right? Usually they're what's called beneficiaries of the contract, and they somehow benefit from the contract. All right, let me give you an example of that, and that'll start to make a little bit more sense for you. Let's say I make a contract to buy a car for my son, right? Do you see how he is not a party to the contract? I make an offer to buy somebody's car. They agree to sell it to me. We've got consideration. We've got items of value passing between the parties, right? I'm giving up money to get a car. That person's giving up a car to get money. That's the consideration. But my son, who's not a party to the contract, meaning he didn't participate in the offer and the acceptance, is somehow ultimately going to benefit by this contract, right? He's sitting there waiting for the car to show up, all right? So that's a beneficiary. Never a party to the contract, but usually receiving the benefits of the contract, all right? And then beneficiary, you'll usually see them in one of two forms, okay? They're either intended beneficiaries or incidental beneficiaries, okay? Now let's go back to that example I just gave you about the car and my son. So I make a contract to buy a car, but it's going to be for my son. He's probably an intended beneficiary, all right? He's the person for whom I made the contract. The only reason why I made a contract to buy a car was to get him a car, because I didn't need another car. Now, what if part of what he was going to do with that car was drive himself to school this year and probably pick up his friend who's going to school along with him on random days when the friend doesn't have other available transportation? The friend might be an incidental beneficiary. All right, that's down the bottom there, and I don't know if I'm a little bit leery about moving the screen. Let me just see if I can. Yeah, you're going to have to bear with me here. It doesn't work quite as well on this computer. So an incidental beneficiary is a third party for whose benefit the contract wasn't made, but somehow gets some collateral benefit, right? So the friend is sitting around going, gee, I hope Donna's son gets the car. Otherwise, I'm going to have a little difficulty getting to school on Wednesdays, or, every first Wednesday of the month because, my car's unavailable that day. So intended beneficiary is truly the person for whom the contract was made. The only reason why I'm buying a car is so my kid gets a car. The incidental beneficiary is his friends that he might drive around once he's got the car. Does that make sense? They're further out on the layers of the onion, right? They're not I don't even think of them. They're not in my mind. I could care less whether they get to school or not, or whether they get to go out. It's not my problem. All right? Now, when you talk about intended beneficiaries, they're usually in one of two categories: creditor beneficiaries or donee beneficiaries. All right? My example with my son in the car, he's a donee beneficiary. He is a third party to the contract that's not obligated to either of the parties, meaning he had no involvement in the contract between me and the car salesman. And at the same time, I owe him nothing, okay? I'm buying him the car as a gift, right? I'm not buying it because I owe him anything. I'm just getting him a birthday gift or a Christmas gift or, starting school gift, or just because I'm, trying to be super nice, okay? He has he's not owed anything from anybody. So you got to look at the beneficiary and see if they're owed anything from anybody. And if the answer is no, they're a donee beneficiary. Now let me give you a different example and you'll see the difference. Let's say I owe you $1,000, okay? I've owed it to you for a little while, and I say, look, I've been short cash, but I'm going to sell my car for $1,000. And that $1,000 that I get from the sale of my car, I'm going to have them pay you. So I don't even touch the money. So I can't spend it on anything else, and I'll have sold my car, paid you off, right? So I owe you money under a separate contract, right? I borrowed money from you, or I owe you this money. So there's the separate contract. And then I make another contract to sell my car. And I say to the person who's buying my car, just pay my business law student. I owe them $1,000, and I just want to make sure they get paid. So just write the check directly to them. Okay, that's a creditor beneficiary. Now, how do you see the difference between you, who's owed money by me, creditor beneficiary, and my son, who's just waiting for a gift? Okay, the difference is my son, who's just waiting for this gift of a car, right, is owed nothing. There's no contractual obligation between me and him. He and I'm not sure. He's just waiting for a birthday gift, a Christmas gift, a, starting back to school gift. You are different. I owe you money under a separate contract. You cut my lawn all summer and I owe you $1,000. That is a separate contract for which I'm obligated to pay you. I don't have the $1,000, so I make another contract to sell my car for the sole purpose, really, of getting you paid. And I even say to the buyer of my car, just pay my student so they're paid, okay? That's a creditor beneficiary. I owe you money. I'm a creditor of yours, okay? I hope that's enough to distinguish that for you. But just think about when you look at that intended beneficiary, just see why the new contract either the purchase of the car or the sale of the car is being made, and look at, if it's to satisfy another debt, an underlying existing debt, creditor. If it's just a gift, donee. And that's what donee means, recipient of a gift. Okay. Now, the reason you go through that whole big thing is to talk about whether these third parties, these people that aren't parties to the contract, whether they can actually sue to enforce the contract that they're not a party to. So the question is, can a third party enforce the contract? Can my son, who's not a party to the contract between me and the guy who's selling me his car, can my son enforce that contract? That's the question. Now, you might be sitting there saying, well, what difference does it make, Donna? You made the contract. You can enforce it. And you're right. The answer is yes, I can. But I'm not hugely motivated, because think about it. Like, yes, you want to give people gifts, right? You want to do nice things for people on their birthday or to celebrate special events. But if you forgot to do it, or, you thought you were going to have this car that you could give the person and you don't feel that bad. It's not your problem. It's somebody else's problem. So the person who really wants to enforce that contract of my purchasing a car is my son, the one that really is going to end up with the benefit of the contract, the car. So the question is, who can enforce that contract? Old rule, old law, don't worry about it, but just know that it evolved this way. Initially, only the people that were part of the contract could enforce it. And the expression was privity of contract. To enforce a contract, you had to have privity to the contract. You had to be a party to the contract. So in the example I gave you with my son in the car, only myself and the car salesman could sue on that contract. Meaning, if I don't buy the car from the car salesman, he could sue me for breach. And if he don't sell me the car, he could sue me for breach. But my son would have no rights under the old rule. Okay? Under the new rule, which is the current law, and it's been the current law for a long, long time, an intended beneficiary, like my son, the recipient of the car gift, can enforce the contract, even though there's no privity between him and the defendant, which could be me or the car salesman. Okay? So let me give you the example again. So I make a contract to buy a car that I'm giving to my son as a gift, right? The car salesman breaches the contract and won't sell me the car. I'm not hugely motivated to sue because I don't really care enough. Or something happens to me and I'm not capable of suing, like I, get sick or something. My son could sue the car salesman and claim that the salesman breached the contract between his mother and between the defendant, the car salesman, and his mother, and he was supposed to be the beneficiary, the recipient of the car, and he wants to either force the sale and get the car sold, or he wants the money back, or he wants if he had to buy a different car and it cost him more money, that kind of money. By the same token, let's do the other example, which is I owe you $1,000 because you mowed my lawn all summer and I haven't paid you. I don't have any cash, so I make a contract to sell my car to some to some other person, and that person defaults and doesn't buy my car. I could certainly sue on that contract, but I have less motivation because I was never going to see that $1,000. I was getting it paid directly to you, the person I owe the money to, the creditor beneficiary. So in that instance, you would want to sue so that you could get the $1,000 paid, so that you get paid for your lawn mowing services. You got it? The bottom line is, under the new rule with the third parties, only intended beneficiaries can sue. Incidental beneficiaries cannot sue. So the friend that my son's going to drive to school, or the friends that he's going to take out on Friday night, they have no right to sue. Okay? If you had said that you, after you got the $1,000 for mowing the lawn, you were going to take a friend of yours on a small vacation, the friend who's going to get the vacation paid for can't sue. They're incidental beneficiaries. They're too far out on the layers of the onion. Does that make sense? Too far away from the actual contract that's being breached. All right? Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. If for some reason that's messing you up and you're confused by it, make a notation and bring it to class with you next following Tuesday, the 30th. And we can certainly go over it. We'll have time for that. So just bear it in mind. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide, hopefully. Yeah. All right, here's a question you can test yourself on. Oh, good. I already used this as an example. Okay, so you're about to start your first year, typo there, at college, and your grandfather decides he's going to buy you a used car as a present. Your grandfather finds a nice, sturdy Toyota Camry and agrees to buy it from the defendant for $450. So let's pause for a moment. So what do we have? We have a contract between grandfather and Camry owner, right? We got offer, we got acceptance, we got consideration, car for $450, right? And I made this even a little bit more intriguing. I brought in some hardship facts, right? Sob story stuff. You sell your bike and you give away your bus pass in anticipation of the new car. When your grandfather goes to pick up the car, the defendant refuses to sell it. And the question is, who can sue the defendant? Just grandfather or both you and grandfather? All right. I'm going to pause for a minute so you can think about your answer. And the answer is 2. Under the new law, both you and grandfather can sue the Toyota Camry owner for breach of contract. Okay? Grandfather, because he's actually a party to the contract and the victim of the breach, right? The failure of the Toyota Camry guy to sell the car. And you, because you're a donee beneficiary. Your grandfather was buying this car solely to give it to you. Solely so you could get yourself to school. Solely so you didn't have to ride your bike in the bus. Okay? You are truly a donee beneficiary. Okay? By the same token, let's say your grandfather owed you $400, and for some reason he goes out and buys you this car, and he's going to give you $450, and he's going to give you the car instead of just giving you cash, right? You would be a creditor beneficiary of your grandpa, and you'd be entitled to sue as well. All right? I'm going to hope everybody's okay with that. I'm going to move on. Okay, another topic that gets discussed in Chapter 12 that we want to make mention of is assignment and delegation. Now, the reason it ties nicely with the third-party stuff is because we end up with third parties, other people that get tied to the contract, and not actually a party of the original contract, okay? So sometimes parties to contracts, meaning the people in the contract, want to assign their rights or delegate their duties. Now let's get an example in our head so we can make sense of it. What if this is a perfect example. So I decided to cover this class that I can't attend by doing a video because we have the technology. So we're going to do it with technology. I could have instead called a friend of mine, and I actually had this as a backup plan. I had asked a friend of mine way back in May, are you busy the week of the 23rd in July? And she said no. And I said, would you be able to teach my class? It's going to be a Tuesday morning, 10 to 12. And I'll pay you. I'll figure out what I get paid hourly by the college, and I will give you 2 hours of that money. All right? And she says, sure, I'll do it. And she did say she'd do it. And that was how I was going to do it right up till about a month or so ago. And I said, this might even work out better. So, in that instance, right, if she had covered my class, I delegation, I transferred my duty, my obligation to teach the class on the 23rd to her. By the same token, I transferred the right to receive 2 hours of pay, right, to her. Assignment is the transfer of any rights. Delegation is the transfer of any duties. Okay? The person who assigns their rights under the contract is the assignor. The emphasis on the syllables moving. And the person who receives the rights under the contract is the assignee. Okay? So, in the example of the substitute for the 23rd's class, I'm the assignor. I assigned my right to receive, pay from the school. And my friend, who is going to come in on the 23rd, is the assignee. She would be receiving the rights under my contract with the school. She would be getting the 2 hours of pay. Okay? Assignor, which is the third entry on the slide, the one who assigns the right. Assignee, the one who receives the right. Okay? Now, it's crucial that you're able to distinguish between the rights and the duties. Okay? Rights are what you're getting under the contract, what you're entitled to under the contract. So if I have a contract with you and you're going to cut my lawn every week of the summer, my right is to a lawn cut every week. Okay? My duty is the obligation to pay you, let's say, $100 a cut. Okay? In that contract, you have a right to receive $100 a week, right? And your duty is to be here to cut the lawn every week, okay? I could say to you, look, do me a favor. Don't cut my lawn next week. I'm not even going to be here. Or my lawn's dead from the scorching heat. Just cut my mother's lawn instead. Hers is nice and green because her yard's shaded, and she'll pay you $100. I've not only transferred my right to receive the lawn cut, I delegated my duty to pay the money, and my mother's going to pay you. All right? Does that make sense so far? Okay. By the same token, you could say to me, if you're the person that cuts the lawn every week, well, if you're not going to be here the week of the 23rd, I'm not going to be here the week of the 23rd. This is going to work out great. I know you want your lawn cut, and my best friend's going to cut it for you. Just pay them. You've transferred your duty to cut the lawn and your right to receive that week's $100. So far, so good? Make sense? All right. The bottom line is, for the most part, people are free to assign and delegate their rights and duties. That's what the general rule is saying up there. Rights and duties can be transferred freely to other people, third parties. There are some exceptions. We'll talk about them. but that is the general rule. Okay, so let's try this. Potter rents a small storefront in Rockport to sell her pottery. So this woman named Potter rents a storefront in Rockport on Bearskin Neck so she can display and sell the pottery that she makes. She has a lease for 1 year, written lease. The rent is $1,000 a month and fully assignable by both Potter, the tenant, and her landlord. Business is terrible due to the COVID virus, because that's when I wrote this. And Potter assigns the last 8 months of her 1 year lease to Mary, who makes and sells masks. Mary fails to pay her rent. Who do you think, who can sue Mary? Who can sue Mary? Who made a contract with Mary? This is tricky. In lots of instances, it's both Potter and landlord. And sometimes it's just Potter. All right? Sometimes it's just the person that's actually made the contract with Mary. And sometimes it could be both Potter, the person who made the contract with Mary, and the landlord. And it depends on how the lease is written. This was really designed not so that you get the right answer, but so that we could explore the issue. So usually when you put language in a contract like that written lease, and you say, the rent's $1,000 a month, and both Potter and landlord can fully assign. If you're good at drafting your initial contract, you will say, and landlord has a right to sue the assignee, which is Mary, the person who got the assignment. If you don't put that language in, that's when you're stuck with just getting sued by Potter. But if you put that language in, both Potter and landlord can sue. Right? So these people that are gaining rights under the contract can not only be sued, but they can get sued. All right, let me change the facts on this poll 2 question, which hopefully isn't poll 3 question, but I'll try it anyway. Let's say landlord evicts Mary while she's paying her rent. She's a model tenant, and the landlord just opens the door on the store, takes the door off the hinges, and Mary's forced to, take her cloth and her sewing machine and get out because she can't keep it, the place secure. Okay, Mary could sue both Potter, the person who leased her the premises or assigned her the premises, and landlord, the person who breached the lease, right? Because both Mary and Potter were model tenants, paying their rent, doing what they're supposed to do. All right? Making sense, hopefully? Okay. Did I go? Lost my place. Okay, I'm now at the right slide. All right. Same general rule. Rights and duties can be transferred to third parties. Okay, assignments can be made, delegations can be made. That's what I'm saying. Assignee is the person who stands in the shoes of the assignor. Okay, that's the person who's getting the rights. Okay, and so all of the rights of the assignor, like in other words, all the rights of Potter belong to Mary. And all the defenses of Potter belong to Mary. All right? That's the point of that poll 2 question. And both the assignor and the assignee are typically liable to the landlord, the obligor. All right? Don't worry too much about obligor and obligee and stuff like that. Just get that assignment and delegation stuff down. Okay. The next thing the book talks about, this is where it gets a little boring, if it isn't already, is discharge of contract. Discharge of contract is referring to when are all your duties under the contract extinguished? When are the parties no longer obligated to perform the contract? All right? When are you done? All right? And the most obvious one is number one. Once you've done everything you were supposed to do under the contract, like in other words, you check off all the boxes on the checklist, you're discharged. So if you are buying my car for $450 and you're going to meet me at school on August 1st at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to bring me a cup of coffee, that's part of the agreement, okay? Once you show up on August 1st with $451 bills and the cup of coffee at 10 o'clock, you have done all the things you were supposed to do. You can check all the boxes. Have the cash. Have the coffee. At school on the right day at the right time. Check, check, check. Once I show up at 10 o'clock on the 1st with the car's the key and the title, and the car is drivable and in its same condition as it's supposed to be, and I hand it off to you, I get to go check, 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 and I'm done performing. So once you've performed all of your duties, you're discharged. The contract is over. It's completely performed. And if you go back 2 weeks to your notes, it's called an executed contract. It's completely performed. Okay? Now, there's times when less, that's 2 through 5, I think. There are times when less than 100% performance, meaning you performed all your duties, is going to be acceptable. Okay? That is going to be, and it can happen in a series of instances. One of them is operation of law. Okay? The law might distinguish your obligation to perform. And if you remember last week when we were in class on Tuesday, we were talking about bankruptcy a little bit, right? Basically, you say, I've got no assets, I've got not enough income to pay my debt, and I've got all this debt. And the bankruptcy court basically extinguishes your obligation to perform those contracts, to pay back those debts, to pay off those credit cards. So the court comes in and says, and they actually give you what's called a discharge. You get a discharge in bankruptcy. And basically what that document says is you're no longer obligated to pay any of those debts. Okay, so you're getting discharged. So even though the credit card company is saying you owe them $5,000, the court by law has extinguished your obligation to repay that debt, or pay that debt, not repay that debt. And so at that point, less than 100% performance is acceptable by you. All right, you're extinguished by law. That's the best example, bankruptcy. I'm trying to think of another one. I'll try to think, but let me do impossibility in the meantime. Sometimes they're really closely related. Sometimes a contract can become impossible to perform by disability, right? You make a contract where you say you're going to do something. I make a contract to teach next semester, and I become so sick that I can't do it. All right, the law might the law would say it's extinguished by disability, meaning I would just say to the school, look, I can't do it. I broke my leg or whatever, or I can't I can't leave the house because I've got some kind of illness that's catchy by everybody, and I'm going to be sick most of the semester. I can't perform the contract. I'm disabled and my obligation to teach for 15 weeks would be extinguished by impossibility. All right? Let's say I'm selling you my car on August 1st and there's an earthquake and my driveway opens up, my car sinks in, and the earth closes again. All right? I can't sell you my car, it's gone. Right? Through no fault of my own. It's really an act of God. That would be an impossibility that would make the contract impossible to perform, and my obligation to give you a car on August 1st would be extinguished or discharged by the impossibility. Okay, so it could be disability on the part of the person, like you actually become incapable of doing the work because you get sick. Or it could be impossible to perform. And I made it so that it's not my fault the car ended up disappearing or the car gets stolen. And it wasn't me being careless that causes the car to get stolen. That might be enough of impossibility for me to be extinguished from my obligation to sell it to you. I'm done. I don't have to do anything else. All right? Everybody good? Okay. This one takes a little bit to make sense of, but once you think about it logically, number 4, you go, yeah, I get it. Okay. Contracts are discharged by the breach of the first party. Once one party breaches, the other party need not perform. All right? Once one party breaches, the other party need not perform. And again, breach means you're not going to perform under the contract. So let's say you and I have a contract where you're going to buy my car for $1,000 and you're going to give me $100 a month for the next 10 months. And at month 5, I'm going to give you the car and you're going to continue to pay the other $500. Does that make sense? So we make the contract today. Every first of the month, you give me $100. After the 5th payment, or at the time of the 5th payment, I give you the car as the key and the title, and then you continue to pay the other $500 at $100 a month. If you breach at week 2 and don't give me the second $100, I don't give you the car in week 5. You follow? Once you breach, I need not perform. Okay? By the same token, if you have consistently paid the first 4 payments, and on the day of the 5th payment, you come with the money, and I don't give you the car, the key, and the title, don't give me the 5th payment. Right? Once I've breached by not bringing the cars, the key, and the title, and I tell you, no, I'm not giving it to you today, I'm not feeling really secure, I've breached the agreement. Don't give me any more money. And that's once I've breached, your performance is extinguished. Okay? Back to the question on the earlier slide, right? Second sentence, when a party's no longer obligated to perform the contract, once one party breaches, the other party's performance is extinguished. You don't keep performing, you'd be an idiot, right? In that case, keep giving me I don't give you the car on week 5, you keep giving me the money. That's dumb, right? You can't trust me. You know I'm not going to perform. You know I'm a deadbeat at that point. And so you should stop giving me the money. All right? Number 5 is what's called by agreement, okay? And there's a whole bunch of subcategories, so we'll be here for a couple slides talking about them. I think there's like 6 of them or something. Like I said, this is where it gets boring and painful. So, now, what we're talking about by agreement is sometimes parties make a contract, and then it gets to a point where either complete performance is not necessary because enough is enough, like you've done it long enough, right? You're going to
cut my lawn for 10 weeks. And as it turns out, my lawn is dead and it's not going to grow the rest of the summer. We might say, you stop cutting. I'll give you an extra $100 and, we'll extinguish the contract at week 8, but I'll give you, you only make 8 cuts, but I'll give you $900. So there's times when we agree that less than 100% performance is going to be sufficient under the contract. You've been paying the $100 a month until you get to $1,000 to buy my car, and on the last payment you only have 75, and I say to you, that's okay, that's enough, don't worry about it. So there's these instances where we may not require full performance. All right. One of them, and A, is called by the terms of the original contract. Sometimes the original contract can provide for an extinguishment or a discharge upon the happening of a specific event. All right. The example I give you there is, I'm going to wash your car for $5, provided you bring the car to my garage. Okay? If you don't bring the car to my garage, I never have to perform. Okay? Because I only have to perform if the car shows up at my garage. If you never bring it to me, I never wash it. And in that instance, I don't have to perform. By the same token, we could use the lawn cutting contract, and that would work. We could have a contract that says, I'm going to pay you $100 a week to cut my lawn for 10 weeks, starting, I don't know, May 15th, right? And the contract could say, but in the event the lawn is dead and not growing, you're to cease cutting the lawn. Okay? Doesn't matter if that's week 8. It doesn't matter if that's week 5. If there's nothing growing, then don't cut it. And in that instance, you don't cut and I don't pay. Do you see how we've made an agreement at the outset that will allow for less than 100% performance? We're saying, you're going to cut cut the lawn every week for 10 weeks, and I'm going to pay you $100 a week. But if the lawn is dead and there's nothing to cut, you don't have to show up to cut. We've agreed that your performance is going to be less than 10 cuts. And we've also agreed that I'm not going to pay you if you don't cut. So I don't have to pay you $1,000 for the lawn cut for the season. That makes sense? All right. 5B there is called mutual rescission. Sometimes the parties can agree to rescind their contract. And in that instance, for it to be a rescission, the parties return to their pre-contract position. I'm missing a period there after position. And the parties return the consideration that they got under the contract. So let's say you are buying my car, and you're going to pay me it's $1,000, and you're going to pay me $100 a week. All right. And we get to, and I'm going to give you the car's the key and the title when I get the last payment. Okay. So you're working towards your payments. And then in week 5, you lose your job. Okay. And you come to me devastated and you say, look, I'm in a bad way. I lost my job. I don't think I can keep up with this $100 a week. I feel devastated that you lost your job. And I say to you, look, let's rescind. Let's make a mutual rescission of the contract. And you say, what's that mean? And I say, we'll return to our pre-contract positions. I will give you back your 4 payments that you already made. And you agree that I don't have to give you the car in week 10. Okay? I give you back your cash. I keep my car. We're in our pre-contract positions. You got cash. I got car. All right? Or let's switch that around so you can see it a little differently. Basically the same facts. You're going to buy my car for $1,000, $100 a week. In week 5, I'm going to give you the car, and you're going to continue to pay the last 5 weeks after that. We get to week 8 and you lose your job and you freak out and you come to me and you say, I can't do this anymore. I could say to you, let's rescind. You give me back the car, transfer the title back over to me, and I'll give you all your money back. And now you got a little cash to get you over the hump of not having a job, and I got my car back. So I just sell it to somebody else, right? We can agree to go back to our pre-contract position for whatever reason. Okay? A little different from C, which I'm going to pop up. Actually, it's E that's the, and I'm going to do E first and then go back because C and E kind of tie together. I really should have that in a different order. Okay. Remember, mutual rescission, which is B, we go back to our pre-contract position. Right? We go back to our pre-contract position. You get your cash back. I get my car back. And it's like we never made the contract. We're back to square one. Okay? E is different. General release, the parties terminate the contract so nobody performs anymore, but they do not return to their pre-contract position. They just stop. Okay, so same circumstances. You're buying my car for $1,000. You're paying $100 a week. Okay? You get to week 8 and you lose your job and you come to me devastated. And I say to you, let's just release each other from further performance. And you say, what does that mean? I'll say, you've given me $800. You got the car. You keep it. We're not returning to our pre-contract position. I'm just agreeing to let you out for less than 100% performance. All right? Let me add to the facts so I can not have to perform a little bit too. Week 8, you can no longer pay. Haven't given you the car yet, but I was supposed to have the brakes fixed before I gave you the car at week 10. I could say to you, because you're saying I can't pay any more money, I lost my job. I could say, you paid the 8 weeks, I got the $800, I'm good. I'll just give you the car, but I'm not going to do the brakes. Okay? We could agree that there's no more performance required, right? You don't have to give me $1,000. You only give me $800. I don't have the brakes fixed as the last thing I do under the contract. So instead of checking all the boxes, we check less than the boxes, but we don't return to our pre-contract position. We just stop. Okay? General lease could also happen with the lawn mowing contract. You could be cutting my lawn every week for $100. And every week that you come here, you do a horrible job. It's worse than the week before. And I could say to you, with all due respect, you stink cutting lawns. How about you just stop and I'll cut my own lawn. You're doing a terrible job. And you say, you know what I realized? I hate cutting lawns. I can't stand working in the heat. And this is what I do when I cut lawns. So at week 8, we could agree that that's the last lawn cut you do. You keep the money for the first 8 cuts. I'm stuck with 8 cuts that I probably didn't like. But you don't do the last 2 cuts and I don't pay you for the last 2 cuts. We release ourselves, but we don't return to our pre-contract positions. We stay right where we are. And we stop. All right. Now there's C and D, which is waiver and novation. Let's do D first because it's kind of spins off of B and E. Novation occurs. Novation actually means new contract. Novation occurs when the parties to the contract agree to replace one of the parties with a third party and release there's a typo there. And release one. It's not. You don't release the third party. You release an original party under the contract. There's a typo. Novation occurs. Let me read how. I'm going to read that the way it should be presented there. Novation occurs when the parties agree to replace one of the parties of the contract with a third party and release one of the original parties from any obligation under the contract. So I have a contract with a house painter who's going to paint my house on August 1st. He breaks his leg, calls me and says, look, I got some bad news. I ain't painting on August 1st. My leg's in a cast up to my hip. But I've got my brother who also paints, and he's agreed to paint your house for the same price. My house painter, the original painter, that's where that third party, the second time third party gets mentioned there is wrong. The original painter is released. The brother's going to paint my house. And so the original painter has performed less than 100%. He's performed 0. Okay? That could happen on August 2nd when he's, halfway through painting my house and he tells me the brother will finish it. That would be a novation as well. The bottom line is a third party comes in and stands in the shoes of one of the original parties under the contract, and the person that is removed from the original contract has performed less than 100%. Okay? That's novation. All right. Waiver occurs when one party that has a right to complain about lack of performance or poor performance, meaning you didn't check all the boxes, the other party didn't check all the boxes on the contract, but fails to complain about the completion of the contract. So you're supposed to cut my lawn every week for 10 weeks during the summer. And on the 10th week, you fail to show up. And I never say a word about it. Okay? Not only, have you gotten away with it? If I fail to complain, sooner or later, I've waived my right to complete performance. Meaning, there's a point where I can't, be chasing you next season to cut that lawn. I've waived my right to complain. The example where you're going to buy my car, you're going to pay $1,000 a month, or $1,000 a week, I think it was, $1,000 a week. And in week 10, I'm going to take the car, have you take the car over to my mechanic who's going to fix your brakes, and I'm going to pay for that. Okay. If you never go to the mechanic, so I never pay to have the brakes done, you might have waived at some point my failure to have your brakes done because you never showed up. And so I didn't check all the boxes on my side of the contract. But you might lose your right to complain about the failure to repair the brakes or do the brakes over, whatever you call that. Because you just didn't, complain timely. Okay. How long it takes before it's a waiver depends on what it is and how it occurs. But just understand that you could, by not complaining, waive your right to complete performance by the other party. Okay? If you were cutting my lawn and part of the deal was you would take the lawn clippings and put them in your truck and get them off my property, but you keep sticking them behind my shed, and I fail to complain about that, your poor performance at some point is going to be extinguished. I just came to accept less than 100% from you. That's good enough. No sense in complaining. You're not going to get anywhere with him, that kind of thing. All right. So let's move on. Last one, I think. And that may be the last slide too, but I'm not 100% positive. Okay. Accord and satisfaction is the last, it's 5F, the last way we can agree to accept less than 100% performance by the parties. Okay? And with accord and satisfaction, it's a little unique. There's actually a complete new contract that's replacing an old contract because there was some kind of bona fide means real dispute between the parties as to the terms of the original contract. So once the new contract is performed, the old contract is discharged. All right? Let's make this the example. So you and I have a contract where you're going to cut my lawn for 10 weeks at $100 a cut. All right? Because I've dealt with a million other landscapers, let's say, and every landscaper has always removed the fresh cuttings from the lawn. They don't dump it behind my shed. They don't leave it in a pile, in my composting area or whatever. I've never had an issue. So I never really specifically said to you, and you'll take the cuttings with you? And I find, you come week 1 and the cuttings are all behind my shed. They stink. They're attracting little animals and stuff. Week 2, same thing. Week 3, I finally catch you on the lawn while you're cutting, and I wave you down, and you stop the mower. And I say, look, what are you doing? I thought you were going to take the clippings with you. They're all over there. They smell. And you say, I didn't know you wanted me to do that. And I said, well, I never would have agreed to pay you $100 a week if you're going to leave the clippings behind my shed. And you say, well, I would have never done this contract if I thought I had to, remove, take the clippings. I don't even know where I'll put them. I don't want to put them at my house, and that's the only other place I got to put them. And we go back and forth, and we're fighting and fighting and fighting. And finally, one of us gets frustrated and says, look, how about the clippings are already back there. It's week 3. I've grown accustomed to it. I'm pissed, but I've grown accustomed to it. I will agree that we'll have an 8-week contract where I will pay you $80 a week, and you could just keep putting the clippings behind my shed. I'll live with it, but I'm not paying you $100. And you say, fine. As long as I don't have to worry about getting rid of those clippings, I can live with $80. We've actually created a new contract, okay? The original contract was 10 weeks, $100. At the, as we're in the middle of week 3, meaning you're on the lawn cutting and I'm complaining, we make this agreement where for the next 8 cuttings, which is the balance of the contract, including that morning's cutting, I'm only going to pay you $80, and you can continue to put the clippings behind my shed. All right? The new contract is replacing the old contract. Once you've made the 8 cuttings, and I've paid $80 a whack. Not only is the new contract discharged by 100% performance, but the old contract is discharged as well with its less than 100% performance by both of us. Meaning, you don't have to get rid of the clippings, and I don't have to pay $100 a cut. All right? They're painful because they're boring, and they're subtly different, and you have to work to distinguish them. But I'm hoping the luxury of having this this video, you can go back and kind of revisit it and go, well, wait a second, why is accord and satisfaction different than this one? What's the difference between rescission and release? And if you go back and you can just look, you'll kind of be able to go, okay. But come back to class, write down questions, make notes if you need to, and we will have enough time to kind of briefly highlight a little bit of it and make sure everybody's okay with it. So I hope this works as a satisfactory substitute, and that you are able to get some good stuff done on Tuesday without class. But anyway, I think that's it. Let me just make sure we don't have any more slides. Oh, sorry, we do. Okay, this is just, let me see if there's any more. Oh, there is more. Shoot. So disregard that. So anyway, poll question number 3. Let's try this one. Donald agrees to purchase Joe's car for $1,000. Donald is going to pay Joe $100 a week. And after the 7th week, Joe will turn the car over to Donald. When Donald makes the 10th and final payment, Joe will deliver to Donald the signed title. Okay? The contract is formalized with a proper writing. Donald makes the first 3 payments and then fails to pay. So Donald breaches in week 3. The question is, does Joe still have to perform and deliver the car to Donald in week 7? All right, let's go over this. There's a written contract where Donald's buying Joe's car for $1,000 at $100 a week. And after week 7, Joe gives Donald the car. After week 10, when the final payment is made, Joe then delivers the title. If Donald stops making payments after payment 3, does Joe just have to deliver the car? Let me give you a hint by going back to this slide. What do you think? Look at this slide and then we'll go back. Does Joe have to deliver the car? Yes, because if he doesn't, he'd be breaching. That's number 1. Or 2, no, Donald's failure to pay or Donald's breach discharges Joe's obligation to perform. Number 2, Donald's breach or failure discharges Joe's obligation to perform. Right, there it is. Breach of contract. Once Donald breaches, Joe need not perform. So the answer's 2. Good. Okay. That's it. This is the last slide. Sorry, forgot about remedies. Okay, we talked about breach, and this was a nice introduction. Breach is any time one of the parties fails to perform. Okay? The contract. If you fully or partially fail to perform the contract, you've breached the contract. And the other party, the person who didn't breach, is entitled to seek a remedy in addition to not being obligated to further perform. The, what's his name? Yeah, the Joe here, the poor victim. Joe is entitled to sue Donald, and he doesn't have to perform. Okay, so he doesn't turn over the cars, the key, and the title, and he's probably entitled to sue and get a remedy. And that remedy depends usually on circumstances. So there's damages, and damages could be whatever money is awarded to the plaintiff for the injury suffered. So let's go back to this poll question for a moment. Donald breaches and fails to buy Joe's car for $1,000. If Joe then goes to sell this car and he can only sell it for $800, how much do you think he sues Donald for? Let's go back and look. Whoops. Donald's supposed to pay $1,000. He breaches the contract. Joe is able to sell the car or resell the car to somebody else for $800. What can he sue for? What's his injury? Think about it. What is Joe out? How much is Joe out? Let's go back. He sues the car to somebody else for $800. What's Joe crying about? How much is he crying about? If you're saying $200, you're right. Joe would be sitting there saying, Donald, if you did what you were supposed to do, if you did what you agreed to do, I'd be $200 richer. That would be what a judge would award. All right? Now, there might be some other damages that could be tied to it. Maybe Joe was supposed to buy something immediately with that $1,000 and he breaches another contract and he gets sued and he owes somebody $100. So maybe you could get $300 from Donald, maybe. Okay. And then there are, in addition to damages are always money. There's something called an equitable remedy. And that's when you want the court to force the breaching party, the defendant, to pay. To perform. Okay? Equitable remedies usually involve, it could be the specific performance or injunctive relief. Specific performance is you truly get the defendant to perform the contract. Injunctive relief, which is another equitable remedy, is usually just stop doing what you're doing. Doesn't apply to contracts too much. But specific performance, you get the defendant to actually perform the contract. Judges do not like to do that because it's like forced labor and they're not really comfortable and it's hard to manage and people behave badly. They rather give you cash. So it's a hard remedy to get, but sometimes there's a reason for specific performance under a contract. It usually involves when the good that's being contracted for is so unique that you can only get it from that person. You're buying my Renoir painting, and I'm the only one that owns that single painting. Okay? If I breach, cash does you no good because you can't buy another Renoir from somebody else. It's not out there. I'm the only one with this painting. You got to get a judge to award or order me to sell it to you for the agreed purchase price. Okay? And then last concept here is this mitigation of damages, which is a plaintiff, the party suing, has a duty to minimize his damages once the breach has occurred. Once the defendant's breached, the plaintiff has to do something to minimize his damages. And that minimization would be exactly what I told you Joe here would have to do, which is sell his car for as much as he can get. Okay, and if it's only $800, Joe would be entitled to $200 from Donald. Okay, but he can't just not sell the car and sue for $1,000. Okay, unless he could never sell the car, like nobody wants to buy it. But you got to do something to minimize your damages. Back to that other poll question with Potter and the lease. So Potter rents this little shop space up in Rockport to sell her pottery, and the COVID virus strikes and the store can't stay open, and nobody's buying pottery because there's no cash, and da 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 da. And Potter just closes shop, doesn't get married to lease the premises, and disappears. Landlord has a duty to try to relet those premises. Now maybe they can't relet it for $1,000 a month. Maybe they can only get $500, and Potter would be responsible for the difference every month till the end of the lease. Or maybe you can get somebody to rent it for $1,000 a month, but it's not till, month 11, and Potter left in month 5, so 6 through 10. 6 through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That'd be 5 times the $1,000 a month rent. So Potter would be liable for $5,000 in unpaid rent. So it's like, in other words, if it's a 1-year lease at $1,000 a month, the landlord's entitled to $12,000 under that contract. If Potter paid the first 5 months, and the new tenant paid the last 2 months, that would be 7 months, 5 and 2. And the other 5 would be what a judge would order Potter to pay if Potter sued. All right? You got to minimize your damages. You can't just sit there and wait for the lease to run out. All right, minimize your damages. Just mitigate means minimize. That is pretty much it. I'm hoping having this, like I said, in video format so you can go back and write over it again if you need to revisit it. But feel free to hold off and not take the quiz until you've come to class and had your questions answered. Don't worry about that. That's it, and I'm going to end it at that. Thanks so much. Have a good week. Bye.